everyone. Today we have Arco and Cooldog. Arco is holding the position that sleepwalking is not an action. Cooldog is taking up position. There's no time limit, and we can start.
All right.
Great. I'm happy to go first because
Yeah,
I'm
I
making
would
the.
prefer it because a lot of what I'm going to say is dependent upon your view, actually. So
Yeah, sure. So what's important about this debate is the notion of an action. And the claim that sleepwalking is not an action is just to say it doesn't fall within the purview of what an action is. So I must define what an action is. On my view, I take something like what Davidson asserted, which is that an action in some basic sense is something that an agent does that was intentional under some description. And there are some other contingencies that are related to that, particularly what intentional under some description means here. But in my case, I take something like what Hornsby talked about, which is a trying to, where you try to do something. That would be a case where we could say we act. And so from this perspective, I do not think that sleepwalking falls under this purview of something we try to do, something we do with intention. It's something that happens to us. So these things that occur, an event that might be causally determined by some type of physical nature, that would just be a happening. Something we intend and try to do is that which we call an action. Sleepwalking is not something we try to do. It's something that happens to us, like bedwetting, something like that. Therefore, sleepwalking is not an action.
okay. Yeah. So I may like want to probe your position a little bit. So is a mosquito biting me? Does the mosquito have an action?
I don't think a mosquito is an agent. If a mosquito was an agent, then maybe.
Okay. So is a dog an agent?
I'm not sure. If it was an agent and a dog
Well,
had intention behind something, then I would say yes, it was an action.
yeah, you see, this is my problem, I think, with your position is I think you're like failing to consider like what an agent means relevant for action, right? I think you're conflating like the bar here should not be like rationality or having reason or having the ability to have knowledge or having self-consciousness, right? I think the bar here is just like something like understanding, where understanding is like the ability to take in and react to stimuli. It's like the bare understanding that all animals have. So like a
Wait,
mosquito, yeah.
sorry. I'm a little confused what understanding is if it's not rational.
Yeah, it's just the bare like apprehension of stimuli and being able to react to it. It's not like higher tier rationality, which implies like conceptualization, which is
Right, but
required for your
reaction implies some type of volition.
right. So then a mosquito does act when it reacts to stimuli, right? When it bites you. It is acting then.
If it has a subjective experience, then there would be volition, which would be trying.
But it does not have the like it doesn't have the ability to have self-consciousness. It's just like it's not sentient, right? You would grant that.
Well, if it's not sentient, then it's a phone. I don't think the phone acts. I think that's just
Right,
a
right.
happening.
So like I
Yeah.
mean, we could say the same thing about dogs, right? And even like we can go up the hierarchy of like animal intelligences. It's obviously a spectrum. I think like on the higher end, you'd agree to me that like orangutans, like chimpanzees, monkeys, maybe even crows, for example, they have this like rationality or like the ability to have volitions, right?
Yeah, I would call those agents. I
You would
believe in
call those
animal
agents,
agency in
but
one sense, yeah.
but now we have this weird situation where like all ants don't do actions, like lower tier mammals don't do actions, fish don't do actions, for example. Most fish don't do actions.
Well,
That
I'm
seems very
agnostic.
weird to
I'm
say.
I'm agnostic on the position of if an ant has a subjective experience or not. If you could demonstrate to me that they
Yeah,
have a
you see
subjective
here again,
experience
you're
and volition,
conflating. See, here's the conceptual misunderstanding: is like subjective experience. All animals that like react to stimuli have a subjective experience because they're a subject that is reacting to the stimuli.
wait, hold on. I don't think that's true though, because my phone reacts to stimuli, but I don't think a phone has a subjective experience. By subjective experience, I mean something like there when I look at an ant, there's something looking back. When I look at my phone, nothing's looking back.
Yeah, but
There
I mean, again, you don't think that like ants, certainly like an ant does not have the mental capabilities to have like this tiered rationality where they can have this trying too. They're just in the state of doing.
I don't know what an ant has.
Yeah, so like I mean, I think that it's better just to say that like having the cognitive capability of understanding is all that's required to have an action present. So, like for example, under your view, if I throw a baseball at you and you catch it, you didn't do an act of catching because there wasn't any in order to or volitional content there. It's merely reactive, right? So you don't do an action when you catch a ball, which seems absurd.
If I
Like
catch it by if I am not aware you're going to throw the ball at me, like let's say like yeah, I'm not aware you're going to throw a ball at me, but somehow I see in the corner of my eye that the ball is thrown, and then I catch the ball. There was no volition there. I would just call that a happening, like a reflex.
yeah, so like even like other things like so for example, and this I just think is like kind of absurd, right? Because like if I'm going down the road and I see a deer wandering in the road and then I swerve my car and I wreck my car and then the fire truck comes to get me out of my car, the police come, the medics come, they're like, what happened? And it's like I say, well, a deer came across the road and then I swerved. I did that action. Right? That seems
Right. So,
like an
but
action
in
to me.
part of action is something being active. You did not actively try to crash off the side of the road. What you reacted to do was not hit the deer because
Yeah,
you have these other beliefs that might be guiding you on autopilot. But these autopilot things, I wouldn't call actions. I would just call like a happening or a reflex. But the action itself, there needs to be something active about
I
it.
mean, see, the problem is now that like your scope of action is ridiculously narrow at this point because any form of sports or any form of like flow experiences aren't action under your definition. Like when I read, for example, and I really get into the book, I'm like fully absorbed in it. I don't have that like second order cognitive volitional in order to explicit.
Well,
And so they're not act.
I don't think that intention has to be a second order thing. I'm not sure why you think intention has to be second order only.
Yeah, so like, but like, and that's the ball catching example, right? So like, when the batter in a baseball game gets a ball thrown his way, he's just reacting. He just has an intuitive understanding from the stimuli of the pitcher, where the ball is in the pitcher's hand, coming towards them, and he just intuitively, through the understanding, hits the ball. He
That's
isn't
a case
ordered content in that moment.
that's a case of a reaction, and I'm granting that's a happening. But whenever I say something volitional, you can have a type 1 style thinking volition, like you're thirsty, you get up and go get a drink of water. There are no like beliefs there that are guiding, no type 2 thinking as part of that experience, but I act in getting water.
Right. So if there's no type 2 thinking going on, right, then why is catching the ball not an action? There's no type 2
Because
thinking.
there's no volition there. There's no trying to catch the ball. There's just catching the
But then
ball.
all people playing sports, right, because they're in that flow state, don't have any volitional action, right? They don't have any of that.
And if you talk, so they might report that they don't know how they did something. Like if you talk to someone who is in a flow state, like after winning the World Series, you interview these athletes, they can't tell you how they won or how they threw that fastball or anything like that. They're just like, I don't know, God was there. They invoke some
Right.
type of like gap there. So I would say that there is volition in playing the sport, but when they're playing in a specific way, it's more like that volitional aspect might be getting out of the way, or they might be setting up conditions prior to get them into this state of being in a flow state where their muscle memory can take over and perform and they can just react and flow. So
Yeah, but
whether or not they are acting in that moment, I don't really know, but that's not relevant to what I mean by an action here.
okay, that's fine. But then if I know that I have the sleep disorder that produces sleepwalking, if I know that about myself, or even if I don't, I just conceptually know that this is a possibility. I'm setting myself up to be in a state where I could be sleepwalking by going to sleep. I have the same thing. It's just like going to sleep here is the beginning of the flow state. And it seems like that we're running the same parallel here.
So with the sleepwalking piece, what's when you're trying to sleepwalk, there's no like guarantee that you'll end up sleepwalking. But what you're doing is like, I hope chance allows that I will sleepwalk tonight,
Yeah, and
and
that's
some
the
of the
thing
things
with
can
the
do it. That's
Yeah.
not an action though. If leaving something up to chance is not an action. Like if
Yeah,
I flip a dice,
sure.
the only thing I tried to do was flip a dice, but I did not like try to get 6. I can't try to get 6. It's chance.
But like going back to the sports example, right? The pitcher, you've granted the fact that the pitcher doesn't know how he's doing it. It's all up to chance from his perspective. He
It's
doesn't
not all up to chance.
know a
It's
ball left
it's
curveball or
it's
slide.
not up to chance because there's a great deal of practice and muscle memory that went into, and also like mental practice. So whenever he throws the ball, it might be the case that there is no volition there that he's aware of, in which case we could call it a happening. I'm fine calling it a happening there, but I would have to have knowledge of his internal state in order to call it an action. I don't have knowledge of his internal state, so I can't grant if it was an action or
By
not.
definition, he's in the flow state and doesn't have this volitional attitude. That's by supposition of the flow state.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So would you agree that someone who's on LSD is not able to intentionally act or something, like just tripping crazy?
Who has experience, I wholeheartedly disagree.
Okay. So it's possible that on your experience you were in control, but other people's experiences is not the case.
I mean, but like if I watch a scary movie and there's a jump scare, there's obviously going to be an involuntary reaction,
Right.
to the jump scare. And that's the same way when you see the pretty fucking colors and all that shit.
Yeah, it's an involuntary reaction.
But that doesn't mean that I don't act while I'm in this state. That doesn't mean that I don't act when I read a book, for example. I'm still doing the action of reading. Reading is still happening.
Yeah, you're trying to read.
Right, exactly. But like under your view, when if this drug does, like Ambien example, right?
Yeah.
If this drug just shuts off my volitional perception, right? Then all of a sudden I can't do any actions. So like this becomes incredibly problematic which is like part of the originating like thought experiment here is if I get drunk, right? And have zero intention of driving before I get drunk, I fully intend to call a cab, right? I don't drive drunk under your view. I'm not performing an action under your view. But like the common sense
driving, so I would say you weren't actively driving drunk, but driving drunk happened and there are consequences with that and we can enforce some type of punishment. But as far as doing it actively, no, I wouldn't say you actively did that.
But you see, under your view, I don't think that you can ever actually be doing the action of driving at all. Because in action, you're just in this constant, perpetual state of like awareness. You're not actively willing to have your wheels of your car going a specific direction and the accelerator at a certain percentage, right? A certain amount of fuel going into the engine. You're not volitionally willing all of this shit while you're doing it.
Well, you don't have to. There's like a function. It's like running or something like that. Like I'm not intentionally picking up one foot or another. I don't have to do that. That can be automatic. But what I am doing, there is an action of going someplace and doing it in this type of thing. There's like a function there. So the function supersedes like the smaller little movements that take place as part of that function. The action is running. Like we have a set of these things being a certain type of thing. So when I drive, doesn't matter if I'm trying to like go into third gear or whatever, I'm driving, the action is driving, but these little motions inside of driving get sort of subsumed inside of that.
So do you believe that we can intend to go to sleep?
Yeah.
Okay, one. Number two, do you think that we can intend to do one action but end up doing the other a different action?
What do you mean?
So like could I intend to go to Walmart, but I get like I end up example. So like I intend to go to Walmart, but I end up getting lost and wind up at Kroger, for example. I did the action of going to Kroger, right? Even though I intended
you just failed in the action.
Yeah, but I did do an action when I went to Kroger, right? When I mistakenly did something else. I was still doing an action, right?
I would say you failed at an action in the same way that like if I try to shoot a basketball and I miss the hoop, I failed to reach my goal, but that doesn't change the nature of what an action is.
Yeah, you still did an action though of shooting the hoop, right? You still did an action though.
Yeah, I shot the hoop, but I failed to get the basketball in the basket.
Sure, right. So here we have now let's go to sleepwalking. You previously said we can intend to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have the action of intending to sleep in our bed,
Yeah.
right? We're still doing an action when we're sleeping. But we happen to sleepwalk.
You're not sleeping isn't an action. Going to sleep would be the action, but sleeping isn't an action.
Sleeping's not an action. But then I fail to see how any continuous activity is an action under your view. It seems
Well,
weird.
what makes it continuous if you're settling the matter continuously, like if you keep recommitting to doing the thing, there's an active, like say for example, if I'm meditating and I'm sitting down, doing like the action itself is to be still. And in that moment, I have an urge to get up, but I stay still. I'm trying to maintain that posture, even though I might not be doing an activity in the sense of like running or something like that. It is active. I am trying to stay in that position. But if I had no volition as part of that, there wouldn't be any type of, I wouldn't be actively meditating or something like that.
Okay, let's go to the Lil Xan example.
The what?
The Little Xan barred out example. So I'm going to take bars. I'm going to take a Xanax with the intention of driving. I black out. Do I act in that case?
You wanted to drive drunk.
I wanted to drive on Xanax, but Xanax blacks me out, right? So I'm in the sleepwalking state essentially, and I happen to end up driving.
So you inside of your statement there, I actively took the Xanax, but I happened to drive, just to sort of reaffirming my definitions here of you actively do this and this other thing happens.
Right, but you see, the blackout state wipes away my volitional content.
You don't have volitional content in the blackout state, but you had it prior to the blackout state.
I had it prior to it, but then once I black out, right, and I'm not driving when I black out.
Mm-hmm.
I black out, and then I end up waking up while driving.
Yeah.
So I did not actually do driving until I woke up. I wasn't doing an action there.
You happen to be driving, right? But then once you wake up, then you can act. Now you're acting. Now you're driving.
Yeah, this doesn't make sense to me because it seems like, I mean, like I had the volitional content to go to sleep. I know
Mm-hmm.
that I could sleepwalk. I happen to end up sleepwalking. It seems like in some way I am acting. When you wake up somebody from sleepwalking, they're like, "Where the fuck am I? What's going on?" Your response is, "You were walking. You were doing the sleepwalking thing. You were doing that type of action of walking while asleep."
Well, so your body was doing the movement. You happen to be moving, and we can call that an action in the sense of a verb or motion. But I think whenever we're saying like action in the sense of something you do, it's not motion. Like if you hit my knee with a hammer and there's a reflex, I did not actively move my knee.
Yeah, you see, this is going back though to well, I mean, I would consider kicking your knee out to be a type of action there. Sure, it's heavily determined by like physical stuff, right? But you're still doing
Mhm.
the action of kicking. Your knee
No, I
is
don't think you did anything.
well, I mean, I think that now like you're presupposing a dualism here that I'm uncomfortable with. Are you committed to dualism?
Yeah, I think that there is a type of top-down causation from the mind.
Yeah, but you see, the problem here is like I mean, to have this volitional content, it just like presupposes that you have a certain cognitive ability that's going to render a lot of like animals and other things that are, I mean, this is again the point about animals, is like your cognitive bar for your dualism to run is very, very high now.
No. I mean, it's not requiring dualism here. Like you can have a totally physicalist notion and still get to the same view. I just happen to be a dualist.
Yeah, right. And so like why is this like waking experience the bar that you're setting when like cognitively when I'm in the sleepwalking state, I still have like all of my understanding intact. Like I can still walk around, I can like perceive my environment, right? Like not consciously though. Like I'm
No,
all
so no, well, so the thing is, like when we talk about action, it's something we actively do. But if our motions are just determined things, they aren't actions at all. They're happenings. You would just be a happening in the universe. there wouldn't be any action to speak of. It would just be a language game. So when I talk about action, there's a content there that's important. So when we say like you intend to go to sleep, you try to go to sleep, the action was going to sleep. But what happens while you are asleep, there's no activity there that you can speak of. You can't give any reasons why your body was walking. You can maybe explain it through some deterministic process, but that's just a happening.
But like your view of action like cuts short, I think, the actual acting bit of it, right? The action seems to be temporally, it begins and ends only once I have the intention, and then action stops.
Yeah, it is temporally located. That's right. There's a causal chain that doesn't stop. Like there's a causal chain of me intending to sleep, and I know that I'm going to sleepwalk, and perhaps I know that in my sleepwalking I'm murderous, so I might have a responsibility because of the causal chain. But I didn't actively sleepwalk.
Yeah, the ethical obligations are more or less aside, right? Like like what obligations you have if you do sleepwalk is different sort of question, right? Independent of whatever, if it's an action or not, it's not going to change your ethical obligations, I think. But like, let's take an example of like another example. I intend to murder somebody. I wake up with the intention to murder. I load my gun, right? Then I pop a little Xan, right? I black out, right? Then I go to someone's house and shoot them. I'm still blacked out. I wake up, right? I did not commit murder. I didn't do the action of murdering. Like what?
You didn't actively murder. You didn't actively murder, but you did murder. So you actively put yourself in a condition where a murder would happen, and your body would perform the act of happening. So you are responsible. The actions you did as part of that were taking the Xanax, training yourself to shoot a gun, so that there's muscle memory, blah 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 blah. But the action itself was just the moment you started the conditions, pulled the trigger. But what happened after the trigger is just happenings.
I did not act when I pulled the trigger. My only act was to prepare to murder somebody.
Right. It's like a landmine in that case. If you take a landmine and you place it in the ground, you actively are trying to harm a human that would walk upon it, right? You set up the conditions where a landmine would go off, but the landmine going off is a chance element. You in your like drugged out state, it's a chance element whether or not you will do it. There's no action there that you can speak of.
Yeah, but then like if I have no volition to kill this person when I kill them, then that's called manslaughter.
You had volition prior to you set up the conditions. So
yeah, but I didn't have any volition to actually murder anybody. I had no.
No, you did. You did
out
have.
when I'm walking to their house. I'm blacked out when I'm walking to their house. I have no volitional content. I'm just happening to be walking
in the moment.
I'm happening to burst in the door. Then I'm happening to shoot them. That's called manslaughter, right?
No, but you can have. But the guilt question has to do with intention for the happening to occur.
I had no intention for the happening to occur
in the moment, but you had intention for a murder to happen.
But we don't blame just intentions to murder, right?
Like, no, intention is a big part of what makes a murder. You have to get the guilt verdict by saying there's intention and motivation. Mens rea. You have to show mens rea. You can show mens rea in that context.
No, I can't, because I didn't have any intentionality. I had no motivation.
You did have motivation to murder them. You did have intention. You set up conditions where a murder would happen. The act of murdering was not something you volitionally did, but the conditions of setting it up is something you volitionally did. So, for example, if you paid someone to murder someone else in your proxy, you're still responsible for murder.
The act of murdering happened. There was an act of murdering, correct?
The event of a murder occurred.
There was an act of murdering. Hold him to that. Hold him to
that. Event, a happening.
He said the act, but like, I mean, I just don't see how this, but that's not how. I mean, I have no volition. I have no mentality. Now, let's do
in the moment, but you had volition to set up the conditions.
So let's take the example of, so under your view, for example, and I hate to bring up my least favorite subject, which is pedophilia, right? Mm-hmm. Like the virtuous pedophile, right? Who has all of the intentions and all the motivational content, under your view, I think is now somehow blameworthy for like raping a child, for example, even if they don't end up actively doing it. Like, no action has to occur now, right, for people to be blameworthy.
I don't understand the pedophile hypothetical.
So like, again, like, so there's two examples, right? We have the
Yeah.
person who has pedophilic desires and actively goes and rapes a child, right, with full intention, right?
Yeah.
They're guilty, right?
Mhm.
Why is it that the pedophile who has pedophilic intentions takes a Xanax, blacks out, right, sleepwalks, if you will, rapes a child, right? I don't know if you can get your dick up on Xanax. That's a separate question. Assume you can, right? Right? Assume you can. That person is guilty, right? But there was no action taken place, right? No action.
So here's what I would say.
So then
The
third example is the pedophile who only has the volitional component, who is in exactly the same place as the second example. Why is one guilty and the other one not guilty? It's
no, the guilt, the question of guilt is different than the question of guilt is different than the question of if it is an action. So the action is temporally located to something like volition, but you can set up conditions where the consequences are abhorrent, and we can put someone in jail for these consequences. We can remove someone for that reason. So they can have mens rea for the act that is morally repugnant, but we could just grant that in the moment they did it, they weren't volitionally doing it. They knew they could do that action when they were passed out or something like that. They did not take precautions. They allowed themselves to do that. So they are responsible for those conditions.
They have no intentionality. There's no way for them to prevent themselves from. They're not in any way trying to prevent anything.
They had intentionality prior to the event. They set up the causal chain that would lead to that. They intended for the causal chain for that to happen.
Right, but we've already established that you can do actions, I believe, that you can do actions where it's mismatched with your original intention, right? You're doing the action of trying to catch a ball. When I throw it at, and you know I'm throwing it at you, you intend to catch the ball, you miss the catch. You're still acting there, right?
You missed the reflex?
It's not a reflex because you know it's coming. You know it's coming. Like, I throw.
Oh yeah, you're acting. You're trying to catch the ball. There's an action there.
Yeah, even though you miss catching it, right?
Yeah, you fail to act. I mean, think of it this way.
You don't fail to act.
Think of it this way. So let's say, like, eating meat, for example.
Sure.
When you buy meat, you are not actively killing the cow, but there's a chain of causation that leads to killing the cow that you are responsible for. But you didn't actively kill the cow. So your action wasn't killing the cow. Your action was supporting an industry that kills cows.
By implication, sure.
Yeah. So when we talk about the action, you have moral responsibility that's not indexed to the action directly. Like, you can still be responsible for the death of someone, but not actively be the thing causing the death.
Well, yeah, sure. You can do actions which make it a high possibility or probability or even certainty that someone is murdered with your landmine example. No one's arguing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But all I'm saying is that, like, when you miss to catch a ball, you're still doing an action, right?
Yeah. You just
right.
fail.
And then I'm not sure why this intentionality story is important. Like, why do we need this intentionality built into it? Why don't we just say that all happenings where you're doing, where your body is doing something, is an action? I mean, this lets us talk about animals in a way that's much easier and cleaner. We don't have this metaphysical question about the consciousness of animals looming over our head. We see that the deer is acting when it eats, right? We don't have to have any divine mysteries, right? It seems much more higher utility here.
Well, when we talk about the deer actively eating, I think we are pulling at that notion of the deer doing it volitionally, which is why we would grant the deer moral consideration. But when the tree, like, bends to move with the sunlight, we don't say that is active for the tree.
No, you can't. Now you're doubling back, because you previously said you were agnostic about whether these animals have the cognitive ability to have volitional activity.
Yeah, I'm not making a claim that they did do it volitionally. I say when we use the term action in that sense, we're pulling at the same notion of volunteerism there. I'm not saying that it is the case that it was volitional. I'm just saying when we speak of deers doing this, we are talking about it in a volitional sense,
Yeah,
not
but
in a
like,
happening sense.
in order to give like the deer agential properties and make it like morally relevant, you have to have a claim on this metaphysical notion. But if we just say that the deer is acting in, by itself, and say that like activity in that sense is enough to grant moral consideration, I don't need to solve this metaphysical problem to give.
So those are different questions. Like what should get moral consideration would
Yeah,
have a different standard than what has action and what types of things can act.
sure,
So
but
the types of things that can act would have moral responsibilities, but something that just has sentience experience would be something that has moral consideration, and those two things don't have to be identical.
sure, but I'm just like trying to show you that like my view can bear more fruit. It has more utility by being able to make these claims a lot more easily than having to go to this second tier fill of mind metaphysical question about volitional activity. What does that specifically constitute? When do we have it? Do we lose it? Can we regain it? Like all of these like mental questions are like you know sort of I don't need to answer them to get all my moral stuff, to talk about things efficiently, to say
I
that the
think we do.
is playing
I think
me.
I think we do need that in order to answer moral questions.
Yeah, but you don't have an
If we're
answer
not
for it.
able if we're not able to act with intent, if you're just a series of mechanical happenings, then there is no responsibility that you have at all. What ends up happening then is there are just consequences. So if it is the case that we have no intent or something like that, I'm a utilitarian tomorrow and I'm going to do everything based on consequences.
Yeah, but you see, this argument works against you, right? Because like now that we're starting to say that, like, hey, whenever intent drops out of it, right? Then it's just consequences, right? Then again, I
If it
erase
is the case,
it
if it
all.
is the case that intentions drop out of it, yeah. But so what I'm saying is intentions can have causal implications for responsibility. They don't need, so you can have ultimate responsibilities rather than proximate ones. But when I speak of action, it's a proximate type of language here, where there's a volition in the moment of doing something. When I intend to go to sleep, the action is intending to go to sleep. What happens when I am asleep is a happening. I might be responsible for what happens while I sleep because I might have knowledge of what I can do, and I may have responsibilities of preventing the consequences of what I do. So I would have to, in a state prior to being asleep, not doing that. So, for example, let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say that you have sleepwalking. You know you sleepwalk, and you know you're murderous when you sleepwalk. If you try to go to sleep and you like unlock doors and stuff, and you like download something on Uber so that you get to someone's house that you want to murder, like in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment or something, you end up murdering something, you'd be responsible. However, in a different situation, let's say you're the same person, you don't want to kill people, you take all the precautions you can to not murder someone, but there's an evil villain who puts you to sleep. And he puts you to sleep because he wants you to murder someone. In that case, when you fall asleep, not through your intention or something like that, you aren't responsible for the murder. The villain is responsible for the murder.
Why?
The villain is the one who used you as an instrument for their murder.
Yeah, but why aren't you just both co-responsible?
Because you had nothing to do with it,
But,
except for your body was controlled by something. Like we could just change this to something like Descartes' demon. If the
sure,
demon is controlling your body, right, and you have no awareness of anything, like you're just in the matrix feeling happy and stuff like that, but your body is in the external world murdering people over and over and over again, and the demon is the one murdering people over and over and over again, who's actively using your body. You just become a gun for the demon in that case, and the gun is actively murdering. You just happen to be the instrument of it.
okay, like here's another, like, let's just modify the murdering example in such a way that like I can, like, I can get out of murder basically. So like I have the conditions to murder somebody. I intend to do it. I take the Xanax, right?
As soon as
After,
you say I intend to do it, you have responsibility.
after taking the Xanax, it chills me out, right? And I have a call of consciousness and says I'm not going to murder anybody, right? But I'm in blacked out state, right? Then I take some Adderall in the blacked
Sorry,
out,
it's
and
you're
now
breaking up for me.
the 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 murderous happening, what you would call happening, right? So here,
Hold on, Cooldog. It roboted for me, so I didn't hear what you were saying.
okay. Oh, sorry. So like,
It's all
let's set
good.
it up again. So like, basically, now we're gonna do like I'll call it the two-phase blackout scenario.
Okay.
So we start with desire to murder. I take Little Xan's favorite pill, right? I black out. Then I have a call of consciousness and completely rid myself of that murderous inclination. Okay. Then because I'm too chill, right? I take an Adderall. And then I go and murder somebody while on Adderall. So when I took the Adderall, I had no intention of murdering somebody. And this is your agent, your evil agent, right? My friend says, "You're too chill, man. Take an Adderall," right? Then I'm no longer responsible for the murder.
Because you took the Adderall and you didn't know what's going to
I took
happen.
the
Yeah, I
Adderall.
think the notion of responsibility is different there. And on my view, I would say there was no action there, active killing involved, because let's assume when you take the Adderall, you didn't intend to murder or something like that. You also lost all control. There's no will there that you have anymore.
Right.
In
So
that case, I would just say that you don't have like moral responsibility, but as a society, we would have responsibilities for something like making sure those consequences don't happen, those who do have volition in that moment. So I could put you in jail for other reasons, and maybe the sentence would be shorter because it wasn't intentional. It wouldn't be an action.
sure, but you see, like the problem here is it seems like the story is exactly the same, but I just add another drug into the mix, and all of a sudden I'm not murdering somebody because of weirdness. I don't understand what the difference is. I think that you're punishable for the actions that you did, namely taking the
So the
drug
consequences,
and
the
shooting.
consequences that happened, you might be punishable for the consequences. I can agree there that you might be punishable for consequences that
Right,
you
because
causally set up, like through neglect or something like that.
sure,
But
it
the
doesn't matter
reasons,
how it causally came about. It doesn't
the
matter. It could be any form of causes.
but there are distinctions, though. There are distinctions between our consequences. If there are reasons for why they happen versus if there are not, we judge them differently.
But at the end of the day, the reason why you are being punished is because you pulled that trigger. You did that.
Right. So from your point of view, if something happens, if motion happens, then an action occurs. Where a murder happened, the action occurred, and you could say something like, "Okay, you acted, you murdered." But then if you apply something like that to a hurricane, where the motion occurs and someone dies in the hurricane actively killed that person. That doesn't hold. It's not just consequences. There is intent there.
I mean, I think that like a hurricane's like the wind sweeping is an action of sorts, not in a robust sense of, you know, this intentionality thing that's happening. I don't think that you precisely need intent for there to be an action, right? I don't think that that's true. I mean, again, you intend to bring it back to the topic at large. You intend to go to sleep. I intend to catch the ball. I just end up failing to do that thing and end up acting in a different way than I anticipated or intended. I'm still acting. I just didn't intend this specific result or this specific action. I ended up doing.
I don't see. So you still act, but the consequences of that action are not successful. Like I still shoot the basketball, I just don't sink it in the hoop, but I'm shooting the basketball. The action remains the same, the outcome is different. But when we speak of the action that occurred, all that happened was I'm shooting the hoop.
Yeah, right. You're the action that occurs is you sleeping. That action is occurring in the sleepwalking case.
Right, but it's a chance. So
Sure,
the consequence
yeah,
is like
chance
I
is
didn't actively, I'm not actively, like, we can speak of actively putting the ball in the hoop if I have sufficient control. Like, for example, Steph Curry, I'm
sure,
fine talking about Steph Curry actively sinking threes because he's the greatest at sinking three of all time.
sure.
But when he misses, he's doing an action, right? But
Right.
what we mean to say with he's actively shooting threes, whether he misses or not, he's still actively shooting threes.
Right.
And the
Whether
consequences
you're
aren't
sleepwalking,
necessary. The
right,
consequences aren't necessary for us to say it was an action. What's necessary for it to be an action is the intent of doing it.
right. Exactly. Exactly. But I think now we're in agreement now, right? Because we say that he's shooting threes, whether he misses it or not, right? I'm in
Mhm.
the act of sleepwalking, whether I intended to or not. I'm in the act of sleeping.
No, so no. He's shooting threes because he intends to shoot threes. But then when you went to the sleepwalking, you're saying, but I'm sleepwalking. I'm actively sleepwalking whether I intend to or not. But the intention was snuck in on the second one. Intention
Okay,
was present in the second one. It has to be present in the first one. It has to be present in the second one for it to be an action.
okay, I think you're missing the. I think I misspoke and you missed the trick. So the trick is that you're actively sleeping with your intentions, right? And then you happen to not be sleeping in the same modality that you intended to be in. Just like Steph Curry is sinking threes, but not in the modality that he anticipated when he took the shot,
I
right?
don't think I don't think I'm actively sleeping. I think I'm actively going to sleep. The action is going to sleep, the process of entering sleep. But when I sleep, I am not actively sleeping. I just simply sleep.
You're not actively sleeping, you just simply sleep.
Yeah, that's right.
Again,
It's just
like
a state of affairs. There's no action behind sleep, but there is action in going to sleep.
I mean, this is just like making me like, but I can almost describe any action in like in the temporal moment when I'm actually doing it, which I could call it just a state of affairs. Like when I'm like riding my bike, right? I'm not having like a specific intentionality behind like the riding of the bike, right? It's just a state of affairs that I happen to be riding, right? And like I can describe any sort of action that way, whether I'm conscious or not. Like intention always comes before action, right? The,
In my view of action, yes. If there's no intention there, then it might just be like a happening or a reaction.
yeah, but you see that's the problem. Whenever the doing component's there, like the intention drops out by your own admission, so then there are no true actions. There's just
No, hold on. But you can get an action can be continuous. You can you can continue to try to maintain an action. So
yeah.
it
So
doesn't just drop off if you're settling it over and over and over again.
yeah, sure, but why is that not just like the falling asleep? It's just a continue. When I'm sleeping, it's the continuation of the
It's
action of
You're
falling
not settling.
asleep.
You aren't settled. There's nothing that you can speak of where you continue to settle sleeping. You happen to be sleeping.
No, you're not doing anything.
That's
Under
right. So
how
it's
are
not
you?
an action. When you sleep, you're not doing anything.
How can
I'm
you?
not doing anything when I sleep. My body might be.
But now you're a dualist.
I'm using dualistic language, but I don't have to presuppose some type of dualist to use
Why
language
not?
like this.
Why not? I think you have to. Because if it's really the body all the way down and we're good physicalists about it, then I don't see why this certain firings of neurons make something an action and another firing of neurons don't.
The intention behind it. So what I'm saying is that
How do
what
you
makes action is the volunteerism there. But if, like I said earlier in the debate, if everything is just determined, there is no action to speak of. It's just a fiction at that point. So it is not an action. It's just something that we would call it, but there wouldn't be any kind of content behind it that would be an action to speak of. So if we are determinists here and hard determinists, then I would say no action exists at all.
Yeah, but like that just seems like very, very strange. And now, like, even if you're not a determinist, but you're
Mhm.
still a physicalist, right? You're having to identify a certain set of neurons firing, whether or not we're determinists or not, right? We
But
can
you can be a dualist and a physicalist. There is
yeah,
such a
sure,
notion out there. Like Daniel
sure.
Dennett is one such person who believes in something like supervenience, where type 2 thinking has causation on the body and alters the nature of things in your body,
Yeah,
where you have a
sure,
belief and alter your dispositions. So when you say I'm a dualist, I can still be a physicalist dualist here
sure.
and say that there's something like supervenience.
Yeah, sure, sure. But like you do realize that like different intentional states are going to be A, phenomenally different, B, even if we are about this like emergent supervenience thesis of, you know, what Dennett or Davidson, I forget. But
I think Dennett was the one
Dennett,
who, yeah.
sure. But even if
Davidson kind of gets there.
yeah. So if we're like this, then you're still having to like identify some type of particular phenomenal state and particular neurons firing, which can be radically different in different situations. Like my intention to catch a ball is a radically different phenomenal state than of like attempting to, I don't know, play a video game. Right? Those are
Mhm.
like radically different phenomenal and neurological states. And so, what is the common factor that you're using to identify these two in the same class? Isn't it easier just to abandon this intentionality aspect and just say that your bodily doing is what we call action? It's much
I
cleaner.
I don't think. I mean, I would agree that they are radically different, like the intention behind catching a ball versus playing a video game. I agree that they are of a different kind, but they are the same species. And what I
How?
think makes it the same species is the intention there. But there would be this other set of things that occur, something that I might call happenings, or we could call it events. Those things would be something non-volitional. We can have motions that we would be
Yeah, I'm
part
not
of.
asking about. I'm asking about how do you categorize? Like, what's your how do you categorizing this as intention and this is not when they're so radically asynonymous?
I'm categorizing it via the volition aspect. I intend to sit down and play a video game. I
Yeah, but
intend to catch the ball.
that volitional state is radically like separate and radically different than the wanting to catch the ball.
I don't see how that changes the definition of action here, though. Like, just because they're different experiences doesn't mean that suddenly now we can't use intention to talk about
I
action.
just think that you're like putting these different things, these different mental states into the category of intentional or volitional by fiat. I don't see any way to determine whether a volitional or intentional action has happened.
Oh, well, no. So there is a problem with determining other people if it was an action or not.
Even for
Like
you.
I can't go into the mental states of another person and confirm that they had any intention there. Sure, like there's a problem there, but that doesn't change the nature of what action means here on my view. I'm saying that what makes it an action is something active about it. There's a trying to do it. There's an intention behind it. If that is not the case, I would not call it an action. It's
Yeah,
it's
but
a, it's just an analytic truth here. I'm not. It's not a synthetic thing. It's like all bachelors are unmarried men. That's what I take an action to be. If you show me that the universe has no unmarried men, then I would just say it's still true that all bachelors are unmarried
okay.
men. There just happen to be no bachelors in the universe.
So now
So
I'm just gonna quote Schopenhauer here and say that the only difference between being awake and being sleeping is that when we're awake, it's like reading the pages of a book in a linear fashion. When we're asleep, we're just pulling them out in like a discongruous way. We still have all the same phenomenal content when we're in a dream, when we're sleeping. We still, I mean, I've had dreams where I intended to do things. They're called lucid dreams. Right now, I have
yeah,
intentionality there. I can have
yeah,
intentionality while I'm sleepwalking. To
right.
be
So
awake,
I could say that you were acting in the dream.
so then sleepwalking is an action then.
No, because sleepwalking is in a different realm. So in the dream, your experience is in the dream. You're not
Yeah,
experiencing the external
my
world.
mental state,
You're not acting. You're not acting in the external world.
my mental state has intentionality to walk in it. I desire the action of
Right.
walking. Like people with
Right. But there's also
anti-indecision do.
but the intention is towards a goal. So you can say that there's intentionality in the dream, and you can have goals in the dream that you'd be working towards that would be different than the external state. Let's say that in your dream you're chopping up watermelons, right? And that's your intention. Your intention is to chop up watermelons, but in the external world you're chopping up a human.
Sure.
I would say that you didn't act to chop up the human, you acted to chop up the watermelons, but a terrible tragedy occurred.
Right, but you're still acting. I mean, you can mistakenly act. We've already proved that. You can mistakenly act, and you're
Right,
still
but that doesn't address the intentionality here. Like, sure, we can mistakenly act, but there's still an action there, and what makes it an action is the intentionality.
yeah,
Sleepwalking has
Jacob
no
makes a
intentionality.
great point, and I want to use his example. Thank you for the free hypothetical. But like, if you pee in a dream and then you pee in real life, you did an action. You did the action of pissing. They're perfectly aligned.
Only by coincidence, because I've peed in my dream and I haven't
Yeah,
peed
but
in
I
real
still
life.
have intentionality, and I still have something
In the
happen,
dream,
and
I would say in the dream, you intentionally peed. In real life, you did not intentionally pee. Because it has to do with, there is also this aspect of the reasons for why you did it. The reasons for why you peed in the dream, I don't know what those are, but in real life, you had no reasons to pee. There was no intentionality there. There was no action of peeing. It just happened to be the case that you peed in real life and in the dream.
where I think the real conflict between us is like you're conflating like a necessity for like the understanding, which is a much lower level fucking
Wait, how am I conflating here? I'm being very clear. I'm not using action in two different ways.
I think that like your requirement of now all of a sudden we need good reasons.
That's not a tell me, but that's not a conflation. Cooldog, that's not a conflation. I haven't used the words in two different ways. You accused me of conflating. In what ways did I use it in two ways? In what way did I use the word in two ways in different contexts?
You're misunderstanding what action is bound to. You're
Explain to me the conflation.
It's hyper.
You accused me of a conflation. What is the conflation?
On the word action, you're conflating what is the substantial requirements for action. You're conflating.
That's not a conflation. That's just a definition different from yours. In order for it to be a conflation, I have to use it in two different ways.
Well, sure. You're misunderstanding the requirement for an action.
So do you grant that I am not conflating here?
You're not conflating.
Do you grant?
Sense.
Okay, thank you. That's all I cared about there. That's all I cared about.
In a rhetorical sense, because now all of a sudden we have to have rationality. We need reason in order to have action, which is like an even higher cognitive bar, right? And so not like
I thought so. It's not all of a sudden. Intentions have reasons. It just was something implicit there. I'm making it clear now that there are reasons there behind an intention. The reason can be something as simple as a disposition. I want. That's a good enough reason for me.
So do little children act?
I don't know. I would say in my experience, I did act as a child.
Yeah, but you don't have like cognitive like fucking abilities there. You don't have reason there. Like we specifically don't allow children to make.
You have some level of reason. You're just not as good at articulating it, and your reasons might be really vague and broad. There are reasons why little kids can do it. You can ask them, why did you do a thing? And they can report to you like, oh, I wanted the cookie. You know, that would be a reason. It doesn't have to be utterly rational or logically consistent.
But now, like, reason just seems to be like an impulse now, almost.
On some people's view, it is. On some people's view, they do take reason to be a disposition, where it's just like a causal chain of like desires and stuff.
Yeah,
that's not my view.
In a sleepwalking state, I have this impulse to walk. I may not cognitively be aware of it, but I have this impulse, and that's enough to give me reason, enough to give me volition.
Hold on. There's a bodily disposition. There's no awareness there, which would be part of your definition using understanding. You have no understanding of sleepwalking, so it wouldn't even be an action on your view, because you already said earlier on that understanding needs to be present. There's no understanding in sleepwalking, so that is not your view.
Again, you're taking understanding to be something like self-consciousness.
No, self-consciousness I take to be different than sentience.
Like I think that like babies have understanding in this sense. Like they have stimuli and like responses to stimuli through like a cognitive process.
Yeah, maybe. But when I hear self-awareness, and this might just be a confusion between how you and I use it, I take self-awareness to be only a type 2 thinking. It is aware that you are aware. It is aware that I am an I that is aware. It is sapience. So I make a distinction between sapience and sentience, but you can have action in a sentient sense. You don't have to have the awareness that like Arco is the one acting, but you would have to have some type of will to do it.
Right. But I'm saying that you don't have to have like that will to do it. All you need is like this very base level.
Yeah.
I'm using understanding in like a Kantian sense, like Hegelian, like slash like
phenomenal sense, right? You mean in the sense of like it's an experience?
Like a German idealist sense.
So in an experiential sense, a phenomenological sense.
No, it's like a cognitive ability that you have. It's like a baseline fucking thing that like it's like you can have passive understanding.
Wait, is it cognitive? What do you, by that you just mean a psychological state?
No, it's not a state. It's just an ability. It's a property that you have as an entity. is bound to it's bound to like your cognitive abilities.
What do you mean by cognitive, yet it is not rational?
Mental shit.
So it's just a mental experience.
It's not an experience. It's a property of the mind / brain /
What's the difference between mental experience and property on your view? It's not clear to me what you mean in this case. Because when you say understanding, like a baby understands, I take that to mean that there's some type of experience there that the baby has. Like there is a subject there.
Mental states are temporally indexed. Mine are not.
They change, right? But there's a consistent mental state as long as you're awake.
You're like knocked into a coma, you always have the understanding there. Like when you're sleepwalking, you have like it's less complex, but you're still able to balance, for example. You're still able to like walk downstairs, for example.
I wouldn't say that's the I wouldn't say that's the mind balancing though. I would say it's more like the body balancing, because whenever I hear the word mind, there's awareness as part of it.
Yeah, but you see that understanding is that's allowing the body to balance in the mental realm. It's like bound to the mind. It's not bound to like bare physics. Right? There's something going on there that's making you react to like the stimuli of gravity in your bodily location in space, right?
Wait, no, you said there's something in the body making you react, but then you said it's not physical. So are you saying that there's some type of mind that occurs when you aren't aware? What is that even like? Yeah, what does that even mean?
Like ants are not like aware, for example, of themselves, of their environment, right? But they have like this basic cognitive functioning.
I don't even know if they do have basic cognitive functioning.
Well, they have to. Otherwise, how are they like? Are they just like machines? Like, where does this go up?
For all I know, they could be. I don't know about that, but I'm not. So what I'm curious about, I don't understand what you mean by that. When you say there's an understanding of mind that's doing.
You cut out. You cut out Arco.
About okay, is it some type of experience? You also say no. Arco, it's not clear to me.
Interrupt you, but you're gonna have to repeat because you cut out there for like 10 seconds.
Oh, it's still not clear to me the difference between this mental, like I take mind to be a mental state.
Yeah, so like
so when you say understanding, I take that to be a state of sentience.
So like awareness, right, is always awareness of something, right? It's like consciousness.
Yeah.
When like
so
the
consciousness
isn't necessarily requiring you to be like you don't need thisness to have understanding. Like what I'm calling understanding.
I just don't see that as understanding though. Like my body might have some type of access to information and can act based on that information, but that body is separate from my mind.
Yeah, you see, your body it has bare sense input. It has the bare sense input. The understanding is what allows that bare sense input to then later become the object of awareness. It's like that intermediary between bare sense input and then like consciousness proper.
The mind is the intermediary?
The understanding is the intermediary.
But so I don't understand how there's understanding if it's an intermediary and there is no awareness of it, I don't see how there's any understanding. All I see is information collecting.
Things like sleepwalk. That's why it exists. Because if you need fucking like some type of mental state, if you need some type of awareness, you need some type of awareness of the world. You can't just operate based upon bare sensory input. Like that's
I would say my body is operating. I have no awareness of it at all. I didn't do anything. No, but the nature of I that we're referring to here is some type of awareness. If there is no awareness, there is no I involved in the process at all.
You're saying that like your body is able to like completely like intuit and just completely be able to interact with like the noumenal. Basically.
Yes, I do think that's true. Like for example, I can point out blind sight. Are you familiar with blind sight?
You should explain it for.
Okay, so blind sight is where the eyeballs work. The body, external from the brain at least, the instruments, the sense instruments, the eyes, the cones, the retina, all that stuff, perfectly fine. The wires going into the brain, perfectly fine. But there's brain damage. There's some type of birth defect or damage from someone who had sight earlier on, where the part of your brain that builds the visual field is injured. So the person who has blind sight has functional eyes, but not able to cognitively process it. They cannot see. So when you are with someone with blind sight, you can throw a ball at them and they can catch it, but they had no idea a ball was coming their way. They had no idea. No. So this is proving this. From my view, this is proving that that the body is able to take in sense input without an understanding of what's around it.
Yeah, but you see, I think that this is proving my point, right? Though, is that like awareness is not necessarily bound to being able to interact with the world on a very base level, right? If you're just getting bare sensory input, there's no way whatsoever that your brain is going to be able to correlate just like the flux of, I'm talking like Locke, right? Like the flux of experience, right? Just the flux of whiteness, redness of the baseball, of greenness, and all that confused like white noise. It's like white noise. So there has to be some cognitive function there that's happening, which I call the understanding, which allows you to synthesize all of that, like, sporadic white noise of bare sensory experience to actually be able to catch the ball. And in doing
Hold on.
catching.
I don't think able to process sense experience is understanding, because I don't think computers have understanding. If your view is able to process external data and process the data, then that's understanding. Then you would have to say that something like Searle's Chinese room has understanding.
No, because I'm binding it to like cognitive shit. So I'm not binding it to like mechanical processes.
No, it is not bound. It is bound to mechanical processes because you're using a physicalist view here. You're saying it is not a mental experience.
I haven't been committed to fucking physicalism or idealism. I'm not committed to any sort of physicalist.
But you used it in this case to talk about there's a physical process, this sort of subconscious process is the understanding. And I'm saying if it's going to be this subconscious, non-aware process, that's your view of understanding. Then you would have to bite the bullet on Searle's Chinese room and say that the translating computer that passes a Turing test has understanding of Chinese.
I mean, but I can grant that AIs can have understanding. I can grant that. There's no problem with granting that.
Right, and I don't agree with that notion. I don't think an AI without some type of subjective experience has any understanding at all. So on my view, understanding is a mental experience. So when I'm asleep, I have no understanding.
No, it's functionally the same. It's functionally the same, right? When you're walking, like you're still firing the same types of neurons as when you're with some differences, right? You're also in the sleep state. So there's like more going on there. But functionally, when you're walking, and then in your view, after you lose the intention to be walking, they're functionally in the same state.
The physical of happenings might be identical, but there wasn't intent or understanding or action. So a robot without a sentience experience that looks identical to me, but there's no subject there. It's just perfectly programmed to imitate all of my behavior. That robot that would be acting in the world, doing everything I do, would have no intent, would have no action, would have no understanding. The person who programmed it could have intention. They could maybe be said to act in some way, but that robot is just happening.
I mean, I think we've gone on pretty long enough, I think. I'm also getting hungry.